Hello, welcome everybody. We're so happy that you're here today. I am Sara Kramer, and this is my co-host here, Tiffany Dunn. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you've joined us before, welcome back. We've had a couple webinars already to Kenya, to Egypt, and then to Peru. So if you haven't been able to listen to those, be sure to look out for your email. I'm going to be resending a recording of all those out so that you can listen to those. And if you want to share with your friends, we'd love that too. They are packed full of information that I think you'll really like to hear. So today we're going to be talking about our 2021 travel destination of the year, Rwanda. As you probably saw, if you follow us on social media, Tiffany recently was there, so she's going to be sharing about her trip. But today we're also joined by Ker Downey Vice President Nicky Brandon. She has been in the travel business for over 30 years, and she's just a wealth of knowledge. So I'm so excited to have her here today. At the end, we'll have time for questions. So if you have questions, feel free to type them in as we go, and then we'll get to them at the end. So here we go. Hey, Nikki, how are you? We're so happy to have you on today. Before we get started, just tell us a little bit about yourself and then why in particular you're so drawn to Rwanda.
Okay, I've been in the travel industry for a very long time, and I ended up working with Ker Downey. I've been here now for 7 years in the States and moved over here, funny enough, via Botswana, as one does. So the reason I'm so passionate about Rwanda is it's so brilliant in the way it's just embraced its tragic history and has moved on. There's conservation and sustainability efforts are incredible, and there's new parks opening up there all the time, and it's just always on the go.
Yeah, no, I agree. So before we really dive into learning about Rwanda, speak a little bit about the genocide of '94. I think I can speak for anybody who's been that would say it's truly just such a life-changing experience. Can you start by giving us just a brief history lesson about it? Because I think it's important for us to really grasp why it's, Rwanda is just so unique.
Yeah, so in 1994, there was a conflict between the Hutus and the Tutsis, which put Rwanda under the spotlight because of the amount of people that were killed there. And there were horrific stories came out of it all, and it was a very tragic history, and people also fled. But then after it was over and done, then people started moving back in, and they just were like, okay, let's go, let's sort this out. So it was a long time ago. It was 1994, and there's been peace since.
Yeah, and we start every itinerary in Rwanda off with a visit to the Genocide Museum. And it's such an important part of any person's visit to Rwanda, because I think it really, sets the groundwork for understanding the country, its people, and just how amazing it is, how far they've come. One of our missions at Ker Downey is, to change our travelers to be changed in some way for the better, for the communities we visit to be changed in some way for the better. And this is definitely one of those experiences that will change you. It's a really, really impactful experience.
Yeah, what I found interesting too is like any person you meet along the way when you're in Rwanda has a different story about how the genocide affected them. And so it's just interesting to see how they've all connected and overcome. It's really, really inspiring. So at the same time, Rwanda has been involved in a lot of conservation efforts, in part because of the genocide. I mean, it just left the country at ground zero, basically, and they have done an amazing job with all their conservation efforts. Tell us a bit about what they're doing now, 20 some odd years later.
So the big, as I referred to it earlier, Rwanda is the land of 1,000 hills. So due to that and the population, there obviously was, encroachment into the land, like where the chimpanzees were or the gorillas. And then also, there's been huge effort to get rid of the poachers, who are now, through education have become, they've actually become the rangers themselves and realized that there's more value in that for the good of the country. So it's, they've also got, they've got the new national parks, which I talked about earlier. There's more accommodation going in, and all lodges that are being built have to be eco-friendly, and there's very strict rules with that. And then they've also been rehabbing, animals, bringing them in from outside because the poaching had been so bad. And then also rehabilitation of the vegetation, getting rid of, any alien species and things like that.
Yeah, I think one thing that all of us probably agree on is the first time we ever visited Rwanda, we were so impressed by how clean it is. And, it's just so interesting that the things that the country has done to reduce pollution. They have one day a month where the entire country, including the president, gets out and goes and cleans the streets. And it was funny, our guide even told us that, their village is already so clean because they don't leave trash or, pollute or litter, that instead on their one day a month, when they should be cleaning, they come together and do community service projects for maybe elderly people in their community that might need work done at their house. And another thing too that's so interesting, and I can't even imagine, of course, I live in Houston, so living in a big city, they were telling us that 2 Saturdays out of the month, all vehicle traffic is shut down in Kigali. And so it promotes, physical activity, and then obviously reduces the air pollution. And I just, I love it. I think it's amazing. I can't imagine anything like that ever happening here, but I think it's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
Plastic bags are banned as well. They even sometimes check you at the airport as you go in. It's just, they've done a good job.
Right, no, I know. Okay, so Rwanda is this small landlocked country in East Africa. And Nicky, tell us a little bit about, we've talked about sort of the history and how they've come so far, but speak now a little bit about the different areas, where they are, and maybe just a touch about each of one, and then we'll move into to a more descriptive version of each park as we go along.
Yeah, so there's the Volcanoes National Park, which is obviously where the gorilla trekking happens. And then there's also, you can visit the golden monkeys too. Over in the top right-hand side is Akagera National Park, which is their big recent success story, which I'll obviously describe more on later. And then there's also Nyungwe, the forest, which is where it's in the tea planting area, tea plantations, and they, as well as good coffee, they do wonderful tea too. And also down in Nyungwe, you can also do the chimpanzee trek, which again is just amazing.
Yeah,
right.
On my recent trip, I only was able to visit Volcanoes National Park and Nyungwe, but I think I'll have to go back to cover the rest of the areas for sure.
Oh, yeah. You're gonna have
Yeah, I know.
You'll have to do Lake Kivu as well, where that's a new beautiful cruise boat has opened up there for 2 nights, and it's all about interacting with the community. It's a new hot off the press property.
Mm-hmm. So Akagera National Park, if you'll see up in the right-hand corner, it actually borders Serengeti National Park. But as we talked about with the genocide, it just was completely decimated, but it's the same landscape, and even more so, it's more so varied. I think there's five different areas, like swamp and mountainous regions and savanna and all the things up in that area. So speak a little bit about Akagera National Park. I do know that there's not as many luxury properties there, but there are a few that we really love. So speak a little bit about Akagera and why it is just such a great story as well.
Yeah, so there, the wildlife was virtually decimated after the genocide in the 90s. And then due to this huge conservation project, it's actually now a big 5 safari destination. And it's got 3 ecosystems. So you've got the Serengeti side, then further up, you've got the swamp delta area. And then there's another totally different ecosystem as you've got the mountainous ecosystems too. They introduced lion there, and it's just that has been highly successful. The Pride has managed to have cubs, and so that's all gone extremely well. And then they've also been they've moved black rhino into the area as well, because they were totally wiped out. And that as well is a project that's going extremely well too. And then also obviously the money is going back into the communities in the form of education and conservation. So that's been, yeah, that has just been a success story in itself. From a luxury point of view, there's one up in the north area of Akagera called Makashi, which is just, it's only just over a year old, and it's doing extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
And with all of the conservation efforts and improvements in Akagera, I think it really makes Rwanda a true, single country destination. And especially since it's so oftentimes a trip that's a second time trip to Africa or third time trip to Africa for people, it's a great way to kind of combine that big 5 safari with the primates. I know for our trip, I really debated over doing Akagera or combining it with another country. And it was my husband's first time on safari. And so I personally felt like he needed to have that quintessential East Africa Masai Mara experience. But if I were going by myself, I definitely would have added Akagera on our trip.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so obviously the big draw to Rwanda is the volcanoes. I mean, the gorillas in Volcanoes National Park. It is typically what Rwanda is known for. Obviously, it's an amazing success story. Tell us a little bit about that, how much the permits cost, and really from start to finish, what that day looks like.
Okay, so you get up in the morning and you head down to the and you actually head down to the headquarters. There aren't any others. There's only one trek a day. The cost is $1,500 per person per trek, which everyone just is like, oh my God, that's so expensive. But let me tell you, it is so worth it. So much so that, a lot of people actually then decide, okay, well, we're going to stay an extra day and do another one. So we obviously do all the hard work back of scenes, change our itinerary, but it can happen. So the minimum trekking age is 15. Rwanda is extremely strict, and even if you fill the group up, they won't let younger kids go. They and the question that we're asked quite a lot is about the fitness level. So wherever they've been successful is all these different families are spread out. The gorilla families are spread out across the mountain. So that means that some treks are easier than the others. So what they do is they try to put you in the groups with your various, people on the same fitness level as you. So I was very lucky. I managed to get on the one that was closer down the bottom. So it was easier for me. It was easier for me, but it was also, it's the slowest goes at the front. So that was me. And the reason that they do that is because it makes them, it means that everyone doesn't get split up. Because also in the national park as well, which people forget, is there's also buffalo and elephants as well. So, it keeps the group together. Equipment that you need, I will be touching on what to pack later on. But they are the one piece of equipment that I think is the most important is the porter. Okay, it's you can't do without it. You can't do without him or her. There was one person on my trek who decided no, she didn't need a porter, and by the end was using mine. I was very nice to share. I was the only one that would share. And they are essential because the ground can be muddy and slippy because, you know, it might have rained. You never know when it's going to rain there because you're in the forest and you're up at a high altitude. So they really are essential. And I think, Tiffany, you really appreciated yours, didn't you?
Yeah, we were lucky and it didn't actually rain during our trek the entire time, but of course the ground was still very muddy. And I think you mentioned earlier that most of the porters are you know, former poachers. And so of course I went into it thinking like, oh, I'm supporting this good cause. And of course we're going to get porters because, you know, we need to support like this conservation effort. And turns out I was really glad to have a porter with me because there were a few really muddy areas where I definitely relied on his support, and it made it a lot easier and less stressful for me. So it was great.
Yeah, and especially, you know, from that giving back to the community aspect, I think it's really important. The group size in the olden days, it was 8, but it's now being reduced to 6 for obvious reasons. And I think they'll probably keep it at that. So, you know, you're getting an even more exclusive experience than you were before. And then another trek you can do, but apparently it's can be quite tough depending on the weather, is the Diane Fossey hike, which you can do on maybe a second day, where you go up to see her burial, where she's buried, and then also, you know, the ruins of where her project was and things like that. Quite a few people do it, and the added bonus there is that you don't have to pay for the expensive permit. It's $75. You still get a guide, and if you're lucky, you'll see gorillas on the way anyway. So it's quite a thing. The rangers go up ahead in front of you, just so you know. They're up and about earlier than you to track to see where the gorillas have gone, and then your guide follows and takes you up to where they actually are. So by the time you actually get to the, you know, gorillas, you've actually got full complement of staff, which is also great. Another quick question we're always asked is Uganda versus Rwanda. I haven't done the trek in Rwanda, but apparently, you know, Rwanda's just a bit more open. But then on the plus side, Uganda is their gorilla permits are a lot cheaper than Rwanda's.
Right. So you had mentioned a little bit about the equipment that you might need. I know this is one of those destinations where you can't really wing it. You have to have the right equipment to go. Speak a little bit about what equipment someone might need to go. And then I know properties themselves have some certain equipment too. So let us know about what packing, in terms of packing, what you would recommend.
Yeah, so I think the most important are your trekking hiking boots, because, as you know, it's hot and humid in there. It can be slippy. It's really important that you know, and make sure they're worn in before you go, so that you don't get blisters, especially if you're doing 2 treks. Otherwise it's, you know, you're not going to be comfortable on your second one. Long trousers and long sleeve shirts. Yes, as I've said before, it's hot and humid in there, but there's also, you know, there are nettles, there are insects. So it's just best to be totally covered up and obviously, you know, wear a neutral color. You'll obviously be taking water with you that your porter, well, your lovely porter, who you can't do without, it carries for you as well. And then some people take along their own gaiters, but those you can hire from most of the properties that, you know, that you're staying at. And then quite a few people take gardening gloves just to, you know, keep the nettles back so that their hands don't get stung, so that they can actually get, obviously with the guides, you know, consent, just get that bit closer or more around the corner just for that magic photo that you can take. And obviously a mask, which we've chatted about. And it's such a lovely touch. They totally blew my mind that when we got back to the accommodation I was staying at, your trekking shoes are automatically taken off you. The property we were at, they gave us, you know, new socks to put on. And then as you head off for your lunch, your trekking boots are all cleaned and everything's done for you. And then, yeah, and then they're returned for hopefully the next day. So from that point of view, it's great.
Yeah, my husband and I were joking every single day we got our boots back. We were like, we need to go see how they clean these because they literally looked brand new, like better than when we got there every single day. And I was like, how on earth have they made my shoes look so amazing after they were completely covered in mud? It was incredible.
I know it's one of those extra touches you don't think you'll need or enjoy or want or anything. And then you're like, okay, I need someone to clean my shoes all the time. You spoke a little bit. Let's move on. Of course, we could probably talk about gorilla trekking in a whole webinar by itself. So if you have any questions, I'm just going to take a moment to say, go ahead and type them in and we'll get them in at the end. But yeah, we could speak to a whole webinar of this. We're going to move on a little bit to talk about Nyungwe. I don't want to miss this incredible spot. It's a shame because lots of people tend to miss this, especially if they're rushed through the gorillas. I preferred this area over any area in Rwanda because it is just so unique and so different. So speak a little bit about Nyungwe and what it has to offer down in the southern part of Rwanda.
Okay, so Nyungwe, as we've touched on, is a totally different area, and it's just beautiful. And I think it's a really nice place just to have an extra night just to relax. As well as the chimpanzees, it's also got loads of other primates as well. And it's just, and then there's the colobus monkeys. So from that point of view, it offers a totally different experience. The chimp trek is about $95, depending on time of year. You get up early and off you go. Again, it's done in the morning. The chimp experience is totally different to the gorillas. So the gorillas are mainly based on the ground, whereas of course the chimps have their nests up in the trees. So you've got to get there quite early before they move, especially if you've gone in the wintertime, because what will happen then is once they're up and there's no food nearby, they're gone. They are so gone. So, but the good thing here is, I mean, the trekking is steep, but what they do is, again, the trackers have gone out before you, so they keep in contact. So again, when we went, because this was a hysterical story, actually, we sat for 2 hours because they were moving so fast. So in the end, because I was flying out of Kigali that night, I had to leave the group and head back. And funnily enough, there they were, right by the vehicle that was about to take me back to Kigali. So I thought they were very rude. So I actually got to see them first and all on my own. So that it was incredible. And yeah, and then there's all sorts of other things you can do around there. You know, you can go and do the tea tasting, coffee tasting. It's just, and then there's also the canopy walk, which is amazing. And again, sometimes, you know, you can be doing the canopy walk, having done your chimpanzee trek, and then there's another group of chimps again. So, but that's luck of the draw, that one.
Yeah, I would also just say the property that we most often use there, Nyungwe House, which has been taken over and reopened by One and Only, is alone a wonderful experience. And I could have stayed like 2 weeks there. I'd love to live there. It's so beautiful, and just the experience there is just magical. So yeah, it's definitely a must see in Rwanda.
So like, yeah, there's just something for everyone here in the gorillas and the safari. I mean, it really is just this tiny but mighty country. And that's how I felt when I went. There's just something for everyone. And before we move on, there's some quirky little things about Rwanda that you would not know of unless you've been there. I recently just found out from Nicky that they are starting to produce wine, which I had no idea. So speak a little bit about some of those fun, quirky things that make Rwanda just so special too.
Yeah, so yeah, and they do banana beer, beetroot beer, and then obviously, you know, they've got funding to start the wines, because I mean, some of those areas are just beautiful, clear, you know, mountainous areas. So from that point of view, it's great. And then also another, you know, obviously there's the golden monkeys that you can go and see, which everyone doesn't really know much about until they actually come back. You can go mountain biking around Virunga. There's also, I would recommend this to everybody, is just do it one sector in a helicopter. it's the most amazing experience, because you're just whizzing around. You think you're really high up, and then you look to your left and there's another terrace with a man working away, and you think the ground, and that was his average day walk up, was to go to his bit of his farm. So it just gives you an overall view, plus it's obviously not a lot quicker, but I would definitely recommend that.
And speak a little bit about the naming. I don't know much about this. I mean, I know it happens. The naming of the gorilla, the ceremony that you went to. Yeah.
Okay, so again, to highlight the conservation, what they do is they pick delegates or people who have done, successful work in Rwanda, and once a year it's the naming of the baby gorillas. So if you're picked, you get to choose the baby gorilla's name, and there's a whole ceremony with it, and the president of Rwanda comes down. He pays, because it's a community area, everyone gets treated to lunch, whether you're a tourist or you're living in the village down the road. Everybody turns up for it. And I mean, the atmosphere is incredible, obviously. And then what they do is, obviously, they can't bring the baby gorillas down to obviously the ceremony, but they show photos of them at the naming and what the name means. Go ahead and Google it. It really is the most wonderful, and it just highlights everything that is just so wonderful about Rwanda.
Yeah, I also saw when I was there, the Ellen DeGeneres campus that's being built. It looks super impressive. I don't know when it's expected to open, but she has a big research campus that's being built there as well, which will be great to visit when it does open.
That's amazing. Okay, so we're going to move into a little bit more about COVID, what everybody wants to know, some requirements there. Before we get into that, we haven't really touched on when the best time to visit Rwanda is. If you were talking to me, I would say you could go at any time. It's one of those countries that even in rainy season, it's a great time to go, because it's not like a true rainy season where it's all day long or anything. So tell us a little bit about the weather and in terms of the best time to go in high season and low season.
Okay, so you're right, Sarah. It is regarded as a year-round activity. It wouldn't bother me what time of the year I went. However, there are some people, and of course they ask you about what time's the best time to do the gorilla trek. So if you're worried about the rain or getting wet, then it's obviously during the short dry season, which is from mid-December to early February, or then again over the long dry season months of June to September, which works perfectly for everybody because it's either the Christmas holidays or the summer holidays. So that does work well. And as you said, though, the rain's not that heavy. So, and then you get
I went in November when it's like true rainy season, and it was like a mist the whole time. It was what I actually expected, like normal weather to be. So it was great. Okay, COVID. Tiffany's going to speak a little bit about this because she just returned and experienced it to, all the things that come with it. So what are the current entry and exit requirements? And what are they doing just to ensure the overall safety of their travelers once they get there?
Yeah, so if any of you were able to follow along on Instagram or Facebook stories during my trip, you saw a lot of these highlights. But right now, because of COVID, you are required to show proof of a PCR COVID test, negative test, that was taken within 120 hours of your departure flight into the country, which was fairly easy. That's plenty of time to get that test. But then when you arrive in Rwanda, you have to stay at one of the designated hotels, one of the hotels that's designated by the government, which the Serena is one and is one of our preferred properties. So that was no problem at all. You typically would spend a night there anyhow. It's just that now with the testing requirement, 2 nights can be recommended depending on what time your flight arrives. So we stayed at the Serena. We got a test. We arrived actually early in the morning, so we only stayed 1 night, but it was super easy. They checked us into our room. We got a call like 30 minutes later that said, we're ready for you to come take your COVID test. It's in room, whatever. We went to that room, took our tests, waited for our results, which we got in less than 24 hours. And then we were free to go on the rest of our trip. Pretty much everything, all the national parks require you to have been tested within 72 hours of visiting the park. And because Rwanda's all national parks, you can pretty much expect to be tested every 72 hours on the trip. Again, it was super easy. It was all arranged for us. We would pop in, have our noses or mouths swabbed, and then go on, and our results would come, and our guide kind of handled all of it. So it was actually quite easy. And honestly, it was really impressive the way that they have handled the pandemic. They've had very few cases. Everybody wears their masks. They have, robots in the airport that like detect your body temperature, that will, if they see you not wearing your mask properly, the robot will come and tell you to put your mask over your nose and your mouth. They have people that are around the cities that if they see you not wearing your mask properly, they'll remind you to, cover your nose and mouth. So they've had a really incredible effort towards keeping their numbers down, and as a result, allowing tourism to come back really quickly, and allowing tourists that are there, like myself, to feel super safe while there. So yeah, I was really impressed by everything.
Speak a little bit too about the CDC just announced that all travelers coming into the United States have to have a COVID test done. So I know when that news came out, we were texting about it, and you said something really great. So speak a little bit about what your thoughts are on that, just because you just went through it.
Yeah, it was interesting for me. Of course, I live in Texas, so on our trip we had to be tested basically the entire way through. We were tested before we left Texas. In Kenya, we had to be tested to go into Kenya. We were tested all throughout the trip in Rwanda every 72 hours. But of course, we weren't required to have a test on the way back because we were flying to Texas, and Texas doesn't require testing. So I felt like that was the most I felt at risk on our trip. And of course, we took precautions and self-isolated when we got home per the CDC recommendations. But there's no guarantee that people will do that. There's no obligation to. It's a recommendation by the CDC. And so I think with the testing, it just will allow travelers to feel safer, and it also protects the communities that we're traveling back to. So if we hadn't, heeded those recommendations by the CDC and had just gone on with our lives, we could have exposed people unknowingly. But of course, we stayed isolated and got tested at home. But had we been tested before leaving, I just would have felt, I think, better about being on a plane with all people who had been tested within the last 3 days versus maybe nobody at all had been tested. So I think it does cause, it can create, I realize, some complications, but what we found so far, and like I said, my experience was that getting tested in country was super easy and did not take away from our experience at all. And that's possible in a lot of destinations. So I think it's a great thing.
And
and it's like
Kigali and everywhere set up, aren't they, with their testing? So it'll be easy to get a test to return with.
Yeah, the testing was super easy, and the results came back so fast too. So
yeah, it's like, what's one more? It's amazing that it hasn't. You'd already done several. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and again, I know y'all might have a lot of questions about this too. I am going to be doing another webinar with Tiffany and MJ, who y'all, if you joined us on our Kenya webinar, you will have met her. She was in South Africa at the same time that Tiffany was in Rwanda. And I'm going to do a webinar more COVID related and specific in the coming weeks. So be on the lookout for that. And we'll go into further detail. But of course, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in. So we're going to move on a little bit from that. In recent years, Rwanda has upped their game in the luxury travel market. What are some of the properties there right now that are just booming and doing great, and that we would recommend to our clients?
So you obviously start your itinerary in Kigali. So there we recommend the Serena, which makes the most wonderful cup of coffee again, and it's a real cafe latte. And then also we use another property called The Retreat, which is a very interesting story. It's an American couple who moved over there, having been, I think he was there for work. And that's a nice boutique-y hotel if you, you prefer that style. And then up at the Volcanoes National Park, wow, they've gone all out there. There's Singita, there's the new one and only. Then there's also Bisati up there, which is the newest. That's very interesting from an architectural point of view. And then in obviously Yakagira, we recommend Magashi, and then obviously Nyungwe, down in the Nyungwe area. And then what we're really interested in is this new boat that has started on Lake Kivu, which is for 2 nights. And that again is, I touched on it earlier, that I think is going to be another good, property that we would use.
Yes, and that's the Mint Collection who is operating the cruise.
Well, and speak to a little bit, because if you're in Nyungwe and then ending in Volcanoes National Park, or vice versa, going the other way, that drive is a good 8 hours. I mean, it's a long drive. So that's where we would either recommend, you do the 2 nights at Lake Kivu on the boat going up there, or the helicopter transfer from Nyungwe up to Volcanoes National Park, right? I did the drive, and it was very long, and it was before there was paved roads. So yeah, it was different, but yeah, it's an amazing opportunity to do something different and brand new. Can you speak a little bit about what space is looking like? I mean, I know Tiffany can speak to the fact that she booked all her amazing properties within a month of travel, which is not normal. And it was a great opportunity, but speak a little bit about 2021 as well for accommodations and space.
Yeah, I don't think with all this development in with accommodation, I don't think the accommodation is going to be such a bottleneck anymore. And with it opening up, so that's a good thing. Obviously, the problem is the actual permits, because they only allow a certain amount a day are issued. So that's what and when you book and confirm with us, it's compulsory. You have to pay the government straight away. So that is more of a bottleneck, I think, than accommodations right now.
Right. So I know price can vary a lot. Speak a little bit generally about what it would cost to do, an 8 to 10 night itinerary in Rwanda.
It depends really on how many there are of you, because obviously, we use private vehicles and everything, but we guesstimated around $1,000 per person per day without the permits. And also, but that can also increase depending on where you're staying. And as I said, it doesn't include the permits or the helicopter transfers.
Yeah, and something that we took advantage of on our trip is Rwanda does offer a 30% discount on the gorilla permits at certain times of year during the lower seasons. If you combine Volcanoes National Park with other national parks in the country. So that was great for us. We were able to get a discount at, it takes it down to closer to $1,000 per person per trek, which was nice.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that from start to finish you have a private guide too, so that's all included as well in the price of your trip. So it's really almost all inclusive. Once you get there. So what are some of the flight routes some could take to get there? I know they're limited right now just because of all that's going on, but speak a little just generally about some of the carriers that are into Rwanda.
Yeah, so normally it's Turkish Airlines, KLM, Qatar, Lufthansa, Kenya Airways, and Ethiopian. Right.
Okay. Yeah, I flew Turkish and got in at 3:30 in the morning. But still, it was an okay flight to fly through Turkey. Okay, so Tiffany and I both spent a week there, 8 days. How many days would you recommend if you were just doing Rwanda as a single country destination?
I would do 3 at each place, just because it's lovely and relaxing. get the trek out the way, or whichever trek you're doing, and then the next day enjoy the area that you're in where there are extra activities for you to do. So yeah, and then you're not rushing anywhere, you've got time to get over your jet lag, and it's just and just take in what Rwanda has to offer.
Right, I could have easily done 3.
Yeah.
Let's talk about combining Rwanda. We know that you can combine Rwanda super easy with East Africa. It's about an hour and a half flight to get there. Talk to us a little bit about some other countries that we might combine Rwanda with. We're seeing more of just not the normal countries right now. So speak a little bit about that and what you would recommend.
Yeah, so quite a lot of our clients also combine it with South Africa. There's flying into Kigali, and then after they've done their whole trek, head down south, or they're doing it the other way. Another new destination that, new as in point of view you can combine it with, is also Botswana. They are, and those are doing extremely well. That's on Kenya Airways. So yeah, you can basically, and obviously with Ethiopia, you can combine it, with Ethiopian Airlines, you can also combine it with Ethiopia, which quite a few of our second, third time safari goers do as well.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, we combined with Kenya. And I think something just to keep in mind when combining, like we said, Rwanda is a really wonderful single country destination. But anytime you go combining countries, anywhere, people tend to lump Africa all into one place, and there are still decent distances. And the biggest thing is if what you're doing is safari, those flights to your safari destinations are usually in the morning, which means if you're coming from another country, you're not going to arrive early enough to go directly to your destination unless you are booking private charters throughout. So, just keep in mind that you'll need that time built in to overnight somewhere along the way. So for example, we overnighted in Nairobi, going between Rwanda and then our safari in Kenya. So that's just something to keep in mind, that if you are combining other countries, you definitely need to be sure to have the time to do it appropriately.
Right, that's a really good point. Okay, so I know we do have some questions, but I do want to say, Nicky, if anyone has any questions or they want to talk more about Rwanda, how can they reach you?
Phone us or head to our website, or anyone can email me directly, that's fine. And then for quite a few of you on here who are also repeat clients, you can just continue working straight ahead with your lovely designer.
Yeah. I think, we're running out of time. I'm trying to keep this in a good time, but Rwanda really is just one of those countries that everyone has a story. We have one of our good clients, I think she's on today, and she's been 3 times to Rwanda. That's just how amazing it is of a country. So definitely, if you are interested, please let us know. We'd love to talk about it with you. We are going to open it up to some questions.
Yes.
We have a few.
Yeah, and actually, I will add to that comment too, from our client who said, she'd been 3 times and really recommends doing 2 gorilla treks, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. I really, really, really wish that we had done 2 gorilla treks. Your time with the gorillas goes by so fast. You're only with them for an hour. And so I really wish that we would have done 2. So I agree with that completely. I would build that time in. I think it's totally worth it. And she also recommended, if you are bringing your own gloves, that what they did was then just leave their gloves with their porters to have afterwards. So that's a great idea. If you're bringing gear with you that you might not have a use for otherwise when you get home, you can leave it there. I definitely appreciated the gloves. I did not bring my own, but was able to use them from the property where I stayed at, and they were very useful while trekking. Okay, one of the questions is, what age do you have to be to trek, Nicky?
Minimum age is 15.
Okay.
Right. And I think that's for the chimpanzees too. once for like you can't just go if you don't want to do the gorillas, do the chimpanzees. You can't do that. I think it's 15 for the chimpanzees too. Yeah.
Would you recommend walking sticks?
Yes, and you actually are given them if you don't want to if you don't want to try and take them with you.
Yeah, I think I know some people have those like collapsible ones that you could bring with you, but they are provided there, and we utilized those that were provided rather than bringing them. What is the price of a porter?
That is, they recommend $10 per trek, but a lot of people, by the time you come back down, give them a lot more.
Yeah, so $10
Right.
is the price, but then of course, it's they're worth way more than that. So I think most people, us included, definitely gave a nice gratuity to our porters.
Well, and to add, because you don't understand, like some people carry big cameras. You have a snack in there, like almost a lunch in there. You've got a towel. You have a big heavy water bottle. I mean, there's just lots of things that you have that you think, oh, I could do that. But it just, once you're climbing through the reeds and all the bushes, it really does, it is worth it.
Yeah. Especially when they end up pulling you up the mountain like they did with me a couple times. Let's see, another question. If you have taken the vaccine, do you need to be tested and have to wait to start your trip?
Okay, so that we don't actually know yet. The one thing that Ker Downey does not know, which as we all know is very unusual, they haven't quite decided yet, but the big thing is they will probably be the first to make the decision ahead of any other country. So we are on standby for that, and we're waiting.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely expect that to happen. It just hasn't officially happened yet. But yeah, I agree, Nikki. I definitely think they will be one of the first countries to make an official announcement about it. Would like to know more details about the cruise on Lake Kivu. If you will send us your email address, we would be more than happy to send you more information on it. Like I mentioned, it is a Mantis collection boat. And yeah, it's like a little 10 cabin luxury cruise, and you do a 2-night cruise along Lake Kivu, which, like we said, has really beautiful scenery. Is it possible to sleep at homes of local families like Casa Particulares in Cuba?
Sorry, Tiffany, you broke up there?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. The question was, is it possible to sleep at homes of local families like Casa Particulares in Cuba?
No, not at the moment.
Yeah. I don't know that their housing is not really, wouldn't be as comfortable as, some of the Casa Particulares in Cuba, nor are they, really well situated to those, like to the park headquarters and things like that. And there are so many great properties there. You wouldn't want to miss all the wonderful properties in Rwanda. Is the guide that goes with you from the US or from Rwanda?
Rwanda.
Yes, always local.
Yeah, and they're amazing, and they speak really good English. Everybody there speaks really good English. And like I said earlier too, they all have a story to tell. So I think that's what makes them so intriguing as they go along throughout Rwanda, is that their story kind of intertwines with your trip. They always have something to say about it that really, keeps you going. And my guide in Rwanda was probably one of the best I've ever had. I mean, we still keep in touch.
However, feel free to invite us along if you want. I'm sure we can come anytime you need
We
us.
can go.
It's all good.
Will you please provide a copy of this video chat? Yes, we most definitely will be sending out a copy. If you can't make the trek, would the porter take you back to the bottom?
Yeah.
And Nikki, I don't know if you touched on this, but I think it would almost be difficult to not make it if you're prepared from the beginning and have the porters. They can literally carry you. I don't know what those little seats are pulled, but
it's like a hammock, but it's built more sturdy than that. Oh yes, I also had Alex as well, Patsy. Yes, I agree with you. So he, so they actually will carry you in that, and also they'll come and get you.
Yeah,
if
so
you
it's
really have had enough.
I think it would be unusual not to make it, just because if you do actually have the porters there to assist you, like they will make sure that you get there, even if that means carrying you. So and also that our past traveler who's been 3 times to Rwanda mentioned that she loved her guide so much that they actually have brought him to the US to stay with them for 3 weeks. So that's wonderful.
Oh, that's
And
so
that
great.
it just goes to show like really how I think how much that experience with the guide really does touch you and change you. And you know, their stories and what they've been through, because the genocide was so recent, like Sarah said, there's no one who wasn't touched by it. I mean, you can't ask, you know, do you remember it? I mean, everybody has some experience. And they're really doing a lot to encourage or to teach the later generations. You know, the young kids are still learning about it and learning about what it means to you know, live in unity and forgive, and you know, all of those things that allow them to be such a strong and successful country.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any more questions?
A few more questions. Yes. Let me scroll
Okay.
down here. Yes. Jamie, who is one of our wonderful designers, mentions that she has photos of the chair that they will carry you in if anybody would like to see that. And then another question: if an active person traveled with a person who was mobility challenged, unable to hike, would both be able to have good experiences? If one tracked and the other partner did not track, would there be enough for the staying behind person to see and do for the trip? Yes, definitely. And we also have had, in fact, I think Jamie went with her son at a time that he was too young to trek. And so even if you travel with kids who are too young to do the trek, you know, the properties can arrange activities for them so that the parents can go along. If someone isn't interested or feels like they might be unable to do the trek, yes, you can definitely have other activities to keep you occupied. And again, you know, I would just like caution anyone who feeling like they're too mobility challenged to do it. If seeing the gorillas is something that you really want to do, the porters will make it happen for you. So of course, if someone didn't want that, then yes, there's definitely activities that they can do. And yes, Jamie did say that, yes, he did stay behind with their guide. So your actual guide that's with you throughout the whole trip doesn't accompany you on the trek itself. So that guide would be available to, say, take them on another activity or anything else. Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to add to that, Nikki?
No, just go.
Yes.
Amazing. So do we have any more questions?
I don't see any more. I think that's it.
Great. Well, if you do have questions, you know where to reach us. Please email us, call us, all the things. We are ready to talk to you. So next month, we're going to be talking about Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And the reason we're going to be doing this, and a little bit more in the Middle East, the reason we're going to be doing this is because those are amazing connection cities that allow opportunity to maybe do for 3 or 4 nights, especially if you're having to test or anything like that. There are some amazing experiences that you could do in either one of those countries. So we're going to be talking about connection cities and how that all works and plays into this environment that we're living in. So I hope you join us. Be on the lookout for that. Tell your friends if you think they might be interested in learning more about that. That's all we have for now. Nikki, we thank you for joining us. It was a great chat about one of our most favorite countries. That is all we have for now. If you if you have any questions, let us know. Follow us on social. We're always updating, you know, things on social and talking there, and we'd love to hear and see you there. So you can find us on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or Pinterest or anything like that. That's all we have for today. So thank you for joining us. Bye.